Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Sad Times. I'm your host, Kevin. This is my favorite part of the week, where my voice does the radio thing. The radio thing is what I've always wanted, mainly because I have a face for radio. This is Sad Times, and for those of you who have never listened to this show before, here's a brief primer. Each week we have a very courageous and generous guest who comes on and talks about times that they were upset, sad, angry, went through some terrible times in their life, and talks about how that affected them, what they were thinking at the time, any number of things, because we as human beings all have very difficult times, and often we don't talk about those as much as maybe we should. And the hope is that with this show, we will allow people to come on who are kind and generous enough to come on, and they will share their stories with us so that people listening at home who might have gone through something similar will feel a lot less alone. The hope is that people will feel a little less alone when listening to Sad Times. And if you haven't already, we'd love for you to make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast and have the settings where you download it every week. We come out every Tuesday. We'd love for you to download it every Tuesday morning. And if you are interested, like our guest that we're about to bring on, to be on, you can email us at sadtimeskc@gmail.com. That's sadtimes, K as in king, C as in cat, at gmail.com. Please shoot us an email, and we would love to talk to you about coming on. We'll let you know how it works. Before we get to our guests, let's get to this week's sponsor. Another one that Brent has found for us. Today's sponsor is the United States Midwestern Accent. We are happy to be the least attractive and interesting accent in World Accent Magazine for the 244th year in a row. That's the United States Midwestern Accent, where musicality goes to die. Wow, man, 244 years in a row? I mean, that's good job, us. But anyway, enough about that. Speaking of accents and speaking of international, we have Kevin on the show, not this Kevin, but Kevin from Scotland, I believe in Dundee, Scotland. Kevin, how are you doing today, man?
Morning, Kevin. I'm good, thanks. Yeah, that's right. I'm from Dundee, just to give your listeners who may not be aware where it is. If you know Edinburgh, 70 miles north of there on the east coast, 70 miles south of Aberdeen. So it's equidistant, obviously, between the two. Wee bit of background on the town just before I start talking about myself. Huge industrial base, certainly around the turn of the 20th century, so early 1900s. Basically, the one area of the sort of well-to-do area of Dundee had actually, outside of London, the highest number of millionaires per square mile in the entire empire.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Based on three things: jute mills, because the jute was imported from India, then it was used for basically rope, for sacks, anything like that. Second one is journalism. There's still a local paper by D.C. Thompson that still runs to produce a lot of magazines. So if anyone's seen Beano Comic, or I think it's Dennis the Menace, you guys have cartoon series, that was all set up in Dundee. And thirdly is basically keelers for jam. Story how Marmalade started was basically a Spanish ship from Seville, docked in harbour. The fruit wasn't doing so great, so it'd been held up a couple of days, so it wasn't right. It was overripe. So this local guy basically bought the fruit anyway and decided to make it a jam. And you can still get keelers, marmalade, and other jam products all across certainly the UK. So really, I mean, what's happened since then? So massive working class employment. A lot of Irish immigrants around the turn of the same time in the Victorian era, just due to famine, due to opportunities that weren't available back in Ireland, and yet very strong working class traditions. Unfortunately, with decline of basically any manufacturing, and especially when Margaret Thatcher came in the 80s, this city was decimated. One of the highest unemployment rates, certainly in Scotland. We had the highest number of drug deaths in the whole of Europe last year. Now, Dundee size-wise, population about 100,000 people, and a lot of people like myself are alcoholics. I don't even know the number there, but I'm imagining it's pretty high. So it's starting to come back now. Computer games have big presence in the city.
Oh, wow.
Employ a lot of people, and same with biotech, life sciences. Problem is, you've got a lot of people with who are not university degree educated in particular fields. So there is historically quite a high level of unemployment, quite a high level of deprivation. Personally, I'm not from a working class. I'm from more middle class families, classify it. I went to university, studied in 6 months in Singapore. I was lucky enough to do that on an exchange program.
Wait, sorry, how old were you when you were in Singapore?
I was 19.
19. Okay. And I do want to go back. You mentioned Margaret Thatcher. Talk about sad times. The first time I read about Margaret Thatcher was a very sad time in my life. And I did not have to live under that. But I imagine it was just what you're saying, the decimation of the working class, of manufacturing and everything. It just had to have been, like you said, feeling the effects of it to this day.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Still playing catch up. And it was the same in Fife next door to us, where there was a lot of coal mines. They've all closed. Same in around Lanarkshire, more towards Glasgow. Glasgow itself, shipbuilding, heavy engineering, that's all gone, as is steelworks and all of that sort of stuff. And there's been very little to replace it, sadly, in a lot of areas,
Yeah.
Which has obviously led to problems with drugs and with alcohol, and then a general sense of hopelessness, people having not very good lives and wanting to get out of it,
Yeah. Yeah. They look for that escape. And it sounds like when you were in university, you said that you were in Singapore for 6 months, and then what did you do? You graduated from university?
Yeah, I graduated from, it's called land economics. So it's basically commercial real estate appraisal.
Okay.
So one thing is, I was the first person at the university history, of course, to win the sort of best marks in appraisal 2 years in a row, which was a big deal. Yeah, so everything going for me. After that, I moved down to London to take a role as a trainee. Was doing all right there.
Mm-hmm.
From there, a bit lonely, didn't know many people in London. Lovely city to go for a weekend, but it's a very hard city to live in with the grind. And then if you don't know anyone, it's quite an unfriendly city. People tend to stay in their groups.
Mm-hmm.
So I struggle with that. I struggle with a bit of loneliness. Met my wife at the time there. She was Irish and we'd been dating for a while. And basically what happened was, I don't know if you remember this, because it would have been early 2000s, there was a dot-com burst.
Sure.
So London especially was huge for dot-com industry. That bubble burst. Unfortunately, it was just after 9/11, actually. My wife was unemployed at the time. Well, she was going to start a course, couldn't do that because she was ill.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, couldn't get any work because it was basically a small recession.
So this is you're saying this is right after 9/11, September 11th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And when did you two get married?
Well, we moved to Dublin.
Okay.
And then we got married in January, 3rd of January 2002.
Okay.
And then by March, we moved over. Reason being, I couldn't afford to keep us living in London on my salary.
Yeah,
and she couldn't get
very
work.
expensive. Did you go to Abbey Road at all?
No, I didn't. I didn't actually get the opportunity. It's funny because there's so many things that tourist attractions that when you live in a city, you just don't even think about going to.
I'm that way in Chicago. I very much. And there's something in Chicago called the Architectural River Tour or River Cruise or whatever. And for years, I was like, I don't need to do that. And then I ended up going on it, and it was great. So anybody who's coming to Chicago, do the Architecture River Cruise. Anyway, but I hear what you're saying, right? You don't go to where God's walked on the street like at Abbey Road because there's... Yeah. And, you just mentioned it. It had to have been unbelievably expensive, but you also said that your wife at the time was Irish, so you guys moved to Dublin, and you guys settled in there. Did you guys grab an apartment, or where'd you guys live there?
Sure. What happened was, it was a funny story. What happened was, there was my wife's granny had died, so there was a a spare house going while the will was in probate, basically for a couple of months in Dublin in a pretty rough housing estate at the time. I mean, I don't know if your listeners maybe seen Father Ted, but it was a bit like that. There was one morning when I was off ill from work, and I opened the door to go to a local pharmacist, and there was actually just 3 random stray horses just walking about the housing estate.
Really?
Which was it was a bit surreal. There was a travellers encampment down the road, and basically they love horses, so there were these horses sort of just roaming about the estate, which was a bit of a shock to the system. So yeah, we stayed there a couple of months, managed to get some money, and then we moved to a better area, just along the road. Rented for a couple of years. Basically, our careers were going pretty well. I worked in financial services. My wife was a press officer for one of the big Irish political parties.
Okay.
So she was working long hours, and one weekend a month. So it was very much, although we were married, I didn't see a lot of her unless the Doyle, the Irish Parliament, was out of session, because obviously it was pretty intense. Sometimes the party she worked for were the main opposition. Mm-hmm. So it was quite challenging, especially around election time and any controversies or scandals.
She could get called at any hour or just expected to work late into the night, right? And that... Yep. I have, and I'm sure, I have been in that position before where I've worked long hours, and it can be very difficult, and it's obviously exhausting. So you guys are there, you're hanging out with the horses, your wife's working a lot. Did you guys start a family of any kind?
Well, what happened was we bought our own house. The Irish economy was absolutely booming at the time. Mixture of a couple of countries joined the EU, so could travel to Ireland straight away from Eastern Europe. It's like Romania, we're talking Poland, Bulgaria, places like that. So obviously the Irish economy is booming. So if you're a migrant, one of those, or if you live in one of those countries and have skills that basically need beauty of the EU is you can travel anywhere. You don't need a work permit. So a lot of builders and the sort of tradesmen came over to Ireland because they were going to earn 3-4 times what they did back home. Fair enough. That's what I've done. Basically, that's why I'm there. So there's a massive housing property bubble. Property prices increasing all the time like crazy. Low interest rates because the rest of the EU is going through a rough time financially. So we bought our own 2-bed apartment in a development. Lovely. Moved in there. Both doing well at our jobs, both enjoying it. And then my wife got pregnant. Once things were a bit more certain about the pregnancy, we decided to buy a 3-bedroom townhouse in the same development. Now, unfortunately, this was at the top of the market. This was just before the financial crisis led by subprime that led to Lehman's and all of that failing. So we were stuck in a situation that almost straight away unemployment went up and up and up. Obviously, with the building trades, it was quite surreal because I worked in one of the few kind of high rise, and by high rise, I mean 7-8 floors in Dublin.
Wow.
So we had a great view across south side of Liffey to the north, and you just saw tons of cranes. I mean, was one day, just before the crash, I counted about 30, 40 cranes from all the new development going on. And suddenly, things started getting worse. You saw that the cranes starting to go away. Because I worked in finance, I was keeping an eye on something called a credit default swap. What that means is if I own £1,000 in bonds, and something happens to the bank, and it's an insurance product to prevent me losing my money. So the price started going up and up and up. First with Icelandic debt, and they went bankrupt as a country, bailing out their banks. Secondly, it was the Portuguese, and then the Italian, and then ourselves. And basically ended up with Ireland having to stand there as a country, and because our banks had all been massively exposed to the property market, and building and giving mortgages, buy-to-let mortgages, financing developers. Essentially, they're all bankrupt. So Ireland as a country needed to basically guarantee them. What that happened was in the space of about a month, the IMF came in to run the Irish economy. So that was bad times. That was sad times for everyone.
Yeah, sad times for everyone, right? And when that happened in the line of work that you were in, did that affect your line of work?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because what happened was a couple of the big clients that Irish office had, we lost those. They just closed their products because there was no demand. What that meant is we needed less people in a lot of departments. My department I worked for had to lose certainly one of the people at the position I was at, and this is where it fed in. My daughter was about 1.5. My son was born then. I had to take a good bit of time off because my wife's pregnancy had been difficult both occasions.
Okay.
But, she had high blood pressure, so I was needing to go from work into get her back to take to the hospital. I was dropping the kids off in the morning at creche, so it was me who was doing that. So if the guys had been sick or were worried about our temperature or that, it was me who was having to stay home all the time. So obviously, when there's 4 of you, one of you has other commitments and can't guarantee to work all the hours God sends, and the other 3 can, well, it's fairly obvious who's going to be getting shown the door.
Yeah, so you got laid off. So it was like a perfect storm of the financial crisis and then the responsibilities of you taking care of your daughter and your son. Now, you had said that your wife at the time, she had difficult pregnancies. Were you aware of that? I mean, obviously that she was having that trouble?
No, absolutely, because it was preeclampsia. So
yes.
It got to a stage where every week she'd be going to get her blood pressure checked. It would be too high. So eventually, as soon as I knew she was going in, I should have just taken her bag with us. And the thing is, because she was in an open ward, it wasn't restful. Her blood pressure went up and up and up, and she couldn't sleep at night. So obviously, her condition kind of got worse. Last couple of weeks, she was in hospital, certainly for the first pregnancy. So that was tough. And never mind the financial stuff, because essentially, like, I was a millionaire on paper between good salary and kind of 60, 70,000 euro when you get a bonus included, and it was performing well. But you've bought a mortgage for a flat that on paper is about 200 grand in equity. Mm-hmm. We bought at the top of the market, so there was a period where we were on paper doing really well financially. But then as soon as that market crashed, we immediately, I think, at the lowest, we lost about half the value in the house.
Wow.
And we actually, because this crash, there were so many people trying to let properties or what have you at the same time, couldn't get it let, managed to finally, but for less than the mortgage was. So you're having to pay essentially a mortgage and a quarter and all the rest sort of stuff.
And you're also out of work at this time.
Yeah, so exactly. I'd lost my job, obviously. I mean,
what would you have to... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I mean, you guys, I think, if I remember rightly, your rate of unemployment was about 10.1%. Ireland, it was 25%. So
25%?
Yeah, you guys were in a recession. We were in a depression, essentially.
So where would people go who had lost like you and 25%? Where would they go? Like, what would you have to do in light of losing your job?
So I know a lot of people, certainly either if they're migrants, just moved back home. A lot of Irish people historically would move to New York, the States, or to London. And obviously times were tough over there. I didn't, because I was married, had 2 kids, blah, blah, blah. I didn't have the same flexibility as other people did. And so I didn't really have a choice, just to stay there and tough it out. I mean, just to give you an idea, I don't know how people in your country collect benefits now, but I'm on benefits at the moment. And what happens is I have an initial appointment, give my bank details, they get paid directly to that. In Ireland at the time, you had to go down and stand outside the dole office every morning, or once a month, say. You weren't given an appointment time, you just turned up, You had to wait in a massive queue outside and basically hope to be seen before the guys went for an hour and a half lunch.
Jeez.
If that happened, you'd go back in the afternoon. So you'd either keep your place and stand there or just chance it that you'd be seen. And if you couldn't sign on for any reason, you get your benefits stopped. You wouldn't get any money.
And this line that you're in, is it outside?
Aye, absolutely. I mean, my worst experience that really still affects me to this day is it was a particularly cold, wet day in Dublin, sort of snow stroke, hail stroke, just really pouring down. And both my kids were sick. So I had to take them both in the buggy down and stand outside the office for, I think, about an hour and a half. In that sort of weather. I mean, luckily, plastic cover I put over the buggy and that, but, it's obviously kind of tough to feed my son in the queue, or you couldn't even rock him to sleep or anything, because it was just that bad. I mean, I was miserable and certainly felt it. So that really affected me.
And how did that,
obviously,
did you, and with that situation, like, I know you said you went down once a month. And was your wife, she recovered? Was she able to get back to work?
Oh yeah, she was working throughout. I mean, fair play to her. My weekly dole money was basically paying for our shopping, because obviously we've got 18 month difference, so both kids still in nappies, diapers, and scum. It's very expensive. So yeah, she was working. I think there was a bit of resentment there, obviously, and frustration that I couldn't get any jobs. But that, she was maybe a bit sheltered from that, because she was a specialist in her own area, had a great reputation. Whereas I'm just essentially another monkey, a highly trained one, but just a monkey,
Yeah, and so, well, I don't know if you're that, but did that lead to the two of you kind of drifting apart then, especially if she was, I assume, going back to working those long hours again?
Yeah, because I mean, I was basically, apart from one day a week, staying at home and looking after the kids, because we couldn't afford the creche fees, obviously. So there was a lot of pressure on her shoulders. And eventually, it's just, you both drift apart, the rows get kind of bigger, all of that. And then just before Christmas, I managed to land myself a new job. And Christmas Eve, we'd had a great day in town. I was starting to think things were looking up. And what did I get? I got a letter from the Irish equivalent of the IRS saying, by the way, your former employer hasn't reported your tax affairs correctly, so you actually owe us £20,000 or euros, whatever it was. So that obviously destroyed Christmas and just led to a lot of stress on me, more problems, starting a new job, all change. And eventually it got too much. I came in from work one day and my wife was crying. I asked her what was wrong. She said, I don't love you. I don't want to be with you anymore. So after that, basically, that's the first time that I really kind of turned to alcohol. I'd been a binge drinker before, a social drinker. Mm-hmm. But that really kind of started it. I'd moved into a separate room. It was very awkward, very tense around the house. Basically, I was struggling with work as well because, of everything else going on. I told the guys the day that it happened, or day after that morning, and they were sort of like, "We'll just get." I was expecting them to say, "Well, you're not in the frame of mind. Your 10-year marriage is finished. Yeah. Maybe just go home and just take a day or two to get back on it." But I was just like, couldn't give a monkeys. Really couldn't care.
What was the work that you were doing at this time?
It was similar-ish to the job I did, but it wasn't directly. It was a slightly different department in financial services. Gotcha. So I was trying to get up to speed, and I was trying to be a team leader for a couple of people who were maybe their attitude wasn't the best, sort of thing. So I found it very, very challenging. And then this happening on top of that, plus that tax bill I mentioned, plus the negative equity for both properties. Probably that was about 400,000 for both of them, if not a bit more. So, and just the home environment not being great, and then me obviously starting to drink basically just to get out in the evening to avoid being in that environment.
So it was kind of like you had said that you were, a binge drinker, etc. But you now started correct me if I'm wrong here, the way I say this, you kind of started to rely on drinking as an escape, and it was like almost something that you looked forward to.
Yeah, it was just basically I'd go in, put my kids to bed. Then my wife was a vegetarian and she never cooked my food for me. So, my daughter especially was very close to me, so she enjoyed me putting her to bed. Sometimes she had a bit of anxiety, so I'd have to stay in the room with her for up to an hour. After that, I can then start getting my own tea cooked. And then basically, once I got that done, rather than sort of go up to like my room and sort of sit there and basically I'd either take cans into the house, kind of sneak them in, or I just go to the pub and sit in the pub and drink and read a book or whatever, that just to escape that atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when it first kind of started. After a couple of months of that, it was just too much. I was mentally pretty much, it was very close to a breakdown, probably as close as I've come. So, my wife actually at the time, or ex-wife, gave me the money to just get a flight back to Dundee, and I just went back to Dundee the next day. My dad picked me up at Edinburgh Airport. I just called my employer, said that's me done.
So you had to. So when you went back, you also obviously had to sever from your job. So you're not only leaving, your marriage of a number of years, you're also leaving your two kids, and you go back to, and your dad picked you up at the airport. How old were you at this time?
I was 31.
31.
I've been married since when I was 22. Yeah.
And so did the drinking continue then when you got there?
What happened was I'd basically, my dad had kind of, my uncle, his younger brother was an alcoholic. He died at 43 from basically cirrhosis liver. I celebrated that last year when I was in AA and reaching 44, because I always thought I was going to be destined to be like him, just die really early. So my dad kind of pulled us aside and kind of, gave out to me, sort of read me the riot act. From then, I stayed with my parents for a year, which was a bit humiliating because I'd left home when I was 18. So obviously it's a bit of my parents weren't too happy about me moving to Ireland in the first place. So it just felt like, and they love telling me that, just that I made a bad choice in that, you know what I mean? Which is maybe not the most helpful. So
yeah, that's tough to hear. It's like, yes, I'm aware, I made that choice.
Exactly. I'm living with the consequences, eh?
Right.
So I was lucky enough in that I got a job in a call centre.
Okay.
After 6 weeks of being employed. Now, the problem for me mentally was it was less than half the money I was getting in Ireland. So I'm used to having money. I'm used to not really having to worry too much about getting a weekly shop, or, if I saw a nice, suit or something, or a nice shirt and tie, suddenly I'm having to worry about, I can't afford it. I'm paying maintenance on top of that. Small amount, big amount to me, but for my ex-wife, a small amount of money, but it's just felt honor bound to keep on paying it. Eventually, I'd moved in with one of my colleagues from work, so I had a room in his place. That was all right. And from there, I met a new partner.
Okay.
Basically, by that stage, when I was out, moved out of parents' house, I developed a drink problem then, first from basically depression. Ever since I moved back from Ireland, I'd been really, feeling bad about stuff. It turned into depression between loss of job, lack of self-worth. There's no sort of prospects, as I saw, to improve myself without going back to uni full time, which I couldn't afford to do because, I've got maintenance to pay and all of that sort of stuff.
So I ask you this? I want to ask you this too, because, I've certainly been down many, many times in my life, and I have turned to alcohol, and it is a temporary solution, right? And how did you, as you go through that, you're having a tough day, maybe you're at the call center, you get done, and you just kind of take stock of things. So you go and you do a lot of drinking. When you woke up the next morning, like, how did that settle with you? Were you more depressed than ever, or was it something that you just kind of got used to?
Well, that for me, I mean, I've had problems with depression, with anxiety, alcoholism. They're all tied in. So
Yeah.
basically, I start feeling really depressed because I wasn't doing as well. I wasn't fulfilling my potential. Um, I wasn't earning a lot of money. I was seeing my friends who had moved in with being single or not having commitments like me. He had a mortgage here, but I'm sure I was paying most of that or certainly half of it. So we always had money, and I was feeling like I'm missing out. On top of that, I'm newly single. Not a particularly attractive picture to paint to a potential date on Tinder or whatever. Oh yeah, I work in a call centre. Yeah, I hardly have any money. That
Yeah.
sort of thing. Unfortunately, so that was like really low self-esteem. So that combined with depression, getting really depressed, I started drinking to feel a bit better about myself. Get that buzz, just feel like kind of happy-go-lucky, change my
Yeah.
mood, and then it gradually slipped because alcohol's so insidious from that to, feel more depressed the next morning, feel stupid, feel like a waste of money, so then drink again. And slowly it turns into two things. When it becomes a pattern, you start forming it, you start getting used to it, you start needing more alcohol. And it also, it's very cunning in that once you get a taste, you feel like you kind of need it. And you've got so much free time to do in Scotland, certainly in Dundee. If we were to go out about 7 o'clock, so about now my time today, really the only place that's open if you don't want to go for a meal and our pubs. If we're meeting friends in the evening, it's in a pub. That's just how it's done in this sort of culture. So it's very hard to avoid alcohol. And on top of that, it's got to the stage. It got to the stage, and it still is now until recently, where I'm drinking because I want to basically I want to just almost get to oblivion so I don't have to think. I don't want to have to deal with what's in front of me.
Do you,
what things are like for me, because I can't handle it.
yeah.
That's my attitude. It was just, this is terrible.
Do you know the play Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by any chance by Tennessee Williams?
I've heard of it, but I have not watched it either live or in cinema, unfortunately.
Well, no worries. It just made me, what you just said, Brick, the main male character, and it has a line about he's a big drinker, and he has a line about how he drinks until he feels that click. That's just what that made me, that reminded me of that. So that I just wanted to say that. Yeah. But I did catch, I think that you said that you met another partner. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So basically the way it went, I had a problem with alcohol by then. I was very, like most of the time when I'm drinking, I'm very charming, quite witty, quite enjoyable to be around. So we moved in pretty quickly together into her house, and basically, so everything was going great. She wanted a kid. I wanted a kid as well because, I knew I was a good dad. When I was there seeing my kids, I was a good dad. And just, she was pregnant. We had a couple of unfortunate miscarriages, tough to deal with, but we were pregnant with she got pregnant with my son Jack, so everything was great. And later she gave birth to my daughter Annie, and they were both really traumatic pregnancy for her. First one, during delivery, she almost died. She lost a hell of a lot of blood. My son was basically not breathing when he came out, and they tried they just took him straight out of the room, and apparently he was getting resuscitated for six minutes before he finally came around. I didn't know any of this was going on. I mean, I was sitting beside my partner, and she was actually a doctor, so she was telling me after she was so scared because she knew how much blood she was using, and just by her colleagues behaving the way they were behaving, and I was totally oblivious to this. Obviously, I was just thinking, going, all right. I knew Jack was obviously in trouble, but I didn't know she was as well.
What you mean? She was in trouble, meaning your partner was in trouble?
Yeah, absolutely. She'd lost a hell of a lot of blood.
Oh, that. I see what you're saying. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so obviously, it sounds like your son was okay in the long run. Okay, good.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was brilliant. And then really it was just she started getting some painkillers prescribed to her.
Okay.
And unfortunately now, but remember, essentially a functioning alcoholic. Although I'm kind of abstaining until the evening, until Jack's gone to bed or whatever. She developed an issue with prescription painkillers. So essentially, we're both addicts. I didn't know this had happened at all, because she was. I just assumed it was natural after such a difficult pregnancy that she would be tired a lot. And she had my daughter pretty close to my son. There's 18 months difference between them. So she was pregnant again pretty quickly. And my daughter was born, and I was working. Things were going okay, doing well.
Were you still speaking to your first two, your kids back in Ireland?
I was, and at that point, I was going over. Since I moved back, I'd always gone over for 2 weeks during the summer holidays to help with childcare arrangements and on and around their birthdays.
Oh,
and
good.
I went over again for both kids' first day at school. So, yeah,
That's great.
and that was where a lot of my money was going for, was saving up, just because my pay was low, and I was basically staying with my ex-wife when I was over there, just in a separate room, obviously, just to essentially help out, help her out around vacation time for her work and stuff like that. So anyway, so I was drinking, certainly in the evenings, and but I was doing that every evening after the kids were in bed, when they started sleeping a bit more regularly. Obviously, my partner was particularly maybe concerned or paying a lot of attention, and that led to a situation where she'd basically gone online and tried to import what she thought was oxycodone and tramadol. So one day I'd been...
Wait, let me just make sure I understood that.
Yeah.
She went online and tried to basically get some drugs illegally sent to her. Is that what you're saying? Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
By I'm doing air quotes, doctor who'd signed a prescription. So what happened was, I was particularly stressed at the time about a variety of issues. Mental health was rubbish. I'd been signed off work as unfit to attend pretty shortly after. In the kitchen of the house, which looks over the front out the window, looking over the front of the house. I fed my son. He's just playing in the next room. And suddenly, this is about 8:30 or back of 8 in the morning, there's like 10 people walking up towards the door in suits and stuff. So knock on the door, I'm in my dressing gown, go up, and it's an arrest warrant to search the house for drugs. So from there...
And at this point, did you know that she had attempted to get these drugs imported?
Not a clue, because she suffered from quite bad insomnia. So, I think she was doing it at night while I was asleep.
I see.
And then when any packages would come, I was at work during the day, so I wouldn't see it. I didn't even know, because obviously. And then, it was just that she just said she was tired, and that would be understandable after looking after two. It's 18 months for a 6-9-month-old all day, so I totally got that, So yeah, didn't know anything about it. A huge shock. So next thing we know, police are searching the house. Social worker obviously called, because it's a drugs thing. We've got 2 small children. I'm taken upstairs. We're both strip searched, which was fantastic. And basically we had our phones, mobile phones. We had our computers, laptops, anything confiscated, and that was it. And from there, things kind of got worse. I felt very kind of betrayed and hurt, which was ironic, because I obviously had an addiction, and I was, losing trust in her, all of that. So eventually, pressure got too much. We split up. I felt I just couldn't trust her, which was a bit hypocritical where I was standing from. But I guess I would say, I was doing most of the stuff openly, because it was pretty clear I was going to the pub and stuff in the evening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we split up. So luckily, my parents let me come back and stay with them, and that's when my addiction spiraled. Really, I was, telling them I was going out to the gym and I was going to the pub. I was sneaking alcohol in. I was sitting up drinking in my room. Eventually got to the point where like any alcoholic, I'd done anything I could for money for alcohol. So we're talking stealing stuff, money, jewelry, pawning it, everything that you do when.
Did you say you were stealing things?
Yeah, so money at my mum's purse or jewelry and pawning it, all of that sort of stuff. That's the sort of level when you're alcoholic you reach. Okay, It really is. And from there, quite rightly, my parents then basically gave me some money for a deposit for a room in a place, and just said, "Look, off you go. You've got to stand up for yourself. If you split up with anyone again or whatever, we're not going to take you back." And now I was very grieved at the time, but after knowing what I've put them through now, fair enough, I would say. So I got a room in another house just because that's all I could afford. And basically, after 3 months of me being there, the landlady asked me to leave. I wasn't particularly abusive or rowdy or anything, but I think she alluded that she'd had some domestic violence in a relationship with her ex-husband, and felt because I was drinking a lot, it was around her too much of that. So fair enough. So basically, I got my own place in not a great area of Dundee. I stayed there for a bit, and then I met another partner who I have a daughter with.
Okay. So and when was this?
This was 2019, so just before the pandemic.
Okay. So and did you move in with her?
I moved in with her.
Okay.
So basically, with hindsight, not just a terrible choice. She had borderline personality, which I never dealt with. I never heard of until I had to deal with it. I mean, my first wife was not physically abusive because she was 4'10" or something, but she was very verbally abusive. Like, I still, from when we split up, if someone is shouting in the house, and I've had this with every partner I've been with, whether not necessarily me, but it might just be out of frustration or out of something else, nothing to do with me, I will immediately sort of cringe and be absolute, sort of on my guard.
Again, I'm not a doctor, neither is my sister, as the listeners know, but I believe that's the very much a symptom of PTSD, where things like that, and then your brain goes into fight or flight, and it sounds like you were, right? You're saying that you were very much on your guard. So, and this was the verbally abusive with your first wife, and now you've moved in right before the pandemic with a new woman, and so obviously the pandemic hits. That is destructive to everyone in so many different ways. And, you've said a lot of times that, when you were stressed out, you would go to the pub, you know what I mean? Yeah. And for a time that must've been not possible. So how did you get through that?
Well, I thought at the time, just to explain, when we first met, and this is how I know I shouldn't have had a relationship, was because she went to have one with me. And she didn't seem to mind me drinking 20, 25, 30 cans of lager a day, okay? I was able to get up in that night to actually have a couple of cans of lager to make sure I didn't have the, kind of withdrawals during overnight. And I was getting up at 6 a.m. My first thing would be I'd have breakfast about 10, and be honest, by 8 o'clock I'd had 5-6 cans, and the worst would be if I timed it wrong and I hadn't bought enough cans the night before, because in Scotland you can't buy alcohol until 10 in the morning. So that was my life. That was me, I thought, probably at the height of my addiction, actually, as an active addict. And, basically, luckily, I'd actually made the decision just towards the end of February to stop drinking. I wanted to stop, and I was gradually reducing from middle of February my alcohol intake down, because basically the doctor said to me I was drinking too much to just go cold turkey. I would have had a seizure or anything of that, so I had to reduce it gradually. So it's a bit kind of counterintuitive to say, well, I want to stop drinking, right? You just need to taper it down. You can't just go cold turkey, Luckily, I got off that in the space of a month, which was just when the pandemic hit. And that was, the doctor said, no way you're going to do that. It's going to take a couple of months to get it. And how it was during the pandemic is I was absolutely fine. During the lockdown, we had multiple lockdowns in the UK of multiple duration. And when I found I started having a problem was when the pubs started opening back up again. And that's when I found that I was really struggling. I was essentially a dry alcoholic.
What is that? No, can you explain what you mean by dry alcoholic?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I've still got an alcoholic mindset, but I'm just not drinking. So I still want to drink. I'm still actively looking for it, and still, be thinking about it all the time.
Got it.
It's a horrible sort of situation to be in. So from there, things opened. We had a daughter together. She's now 2, and things started really going downhill, especially around me drinking. It would basically, she had an abusive relationship as well in the past. Her ex-husband was like that and drank a hell of a lot and took drugs and stuff. And basically, it seemed that when I had a couple of drinks, even if I was fairly mild, I wasn't whatever, I wasn't aggressive, or if she knew I'd had a couple of drinks, that would, I think, trigger her. And because then triggered her borderline personality, and then it would make things very difficult for everyone. So finally, ended up, we had a big row. Basically, I was arrested. I was in police cells from Friday afternoon until Monday afternoon to appear in court. I was then, kind of left, and basically that was us split. She didn't want me back, so that was me homeless.
Wait, you ended up homeless after that?
Yeah, because I didn't know where to go.
Right, your parents had said you can't come home.
My parents had said no chance, not even for a night. And obviously she didn't want me back, so that was a pretty sharp shock. So after that happened, we still had the daughter together. I couldn't see her for over a month. I'd spent the first 2 weeks of being homeless absolutely smashed. I was drinking as much as I couldn't bring drinking out in my flat, which was a godsend. So I was drinking out in the pub. I never kind of drank in the street. I'm not that type of person, or I just thought, but for whatever reason, just self-esteem and self-worth, I don't want to be hanging about outside just drinking cans,
Yeah.
So that helped. After about 2 weeks, I went, right, okay, this is just not going to do anything. This is stupid. I've got a choice here. I can either keep on going and die of it, or I can, really take this seriously and try and get myself sober.
And when was this? Sorry, just trying to follow the timeline.
Yeah, this was June last year.
June of 2022. Okay, gotcha. And so, okay. And what?
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So I started going to E, and it was working actually really well. I had about 5 months of sobriety. I had maybe one day kind of lapses where I gave it a temptation. I'd had a good few beers, and then I've got the attitude now. I've been guilty, felt guilty so many times where I've not been able to stop my drinking, and I've had a lapse.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the worst thing you can feel was guilt and remorse, and if only, and I wish I hadn't done that. That's just a waste of energy. So very much from my experience, what I do is I say, right, you've had a lapse, forget it. Learn what you can from what caused you to do it, and just make sure tomorrow, say, I'm going to get right back and be sober and build up from there.
If I have to say that's really, that's really admirable to be able to do that. Especially as you said, you're somebody who struggled with depression and anxiety. Man, that voice in the head when you mess up, it can be very brutal. So the fact that you have been able to get there, I think is a real, kudos to you.
It's just I'll go say from my experience, every time you have a lapse, if you let it go on into the next day, it could be a week, it could be a month, it could be 3 months. It's harder every time just to say, right, I'm going to stop. So the longer you keep going, drinking, the more difficult it gets. And not all of us maybe get another chance to get sober again, because of whatever, So that's kind of what I've learned from there. So about August last year, I'd started dating someone. Been homeless 9 months to that point. We're getting on fantastic. This is a recurring theme here. I moved in with her in where was it? Start of October.
Okay.
And then I was going up and down to Dundee 4 times a week. So it was about an hour on the bus. I had community work service to do basically for what had happened with me getting arrested. So I was trying to get that done. I was trying to see my daughter with contact. So I was up in Dundee 4 times a week. That was me getting up at 5:30 in the morning, getting on the bus, starting work all day, back in the evening about 7. And it was hard going, but I was in my routine and enjoying it, enjoying doing the work, enjoying seeing my daughter under a tremendous amount of pressure from my youngest daughter's mum. Basically, I found out from social work that what had happened was the last 7 months of our relationship, she'd been having an affair. And as soon as I moved out, or was thrown out more accurately, she did everything she could to stop me seeing my daughter. The person she'd been having an affair with basically moved in within 2 weeks of me getting kicked out. He had a bit of a criminal record. I wasn't exactly happy, and even with social work. And yeah, it's just been tough. I mean, as far as I'm aware, they're still together. But my ex was sent fairly abusive emails. I can't contact her because I've got like a restraining order against me because of my conviction. You automatically get one in Scotland against you for a load of ongoing sort of harassing and just verbally abusive emails, all of that sort of stuff. And it's hard to deal with, but I've got to keep myself right. So what happened was basically morning of, I think it was the 7th of December, I was doing really well, sobriety. That was me about 6 months so, well, give or take, about 6 months sober coming up for the next week. And I got up to Dundee and basically I'd sat down to have a coffee before I started my community service and didn't feel right, was slurring my speech. My arm and leg, all my left side felt really heavy, difficult to move. I was kind of drinking coffee and sort of dribbling over myself because my mouth was paralysed on the left-hand side. Let the guys in the community service team who was with at the moment know what was happening. They called an ambulance and I was taken up to the local hospital because basically I suffered a stroke at 44. So that was me in hospital for a couple of days, got out, and my mental health just went through the floor. Basically, I love reading. I couldn't have the concentration to read. My leg was fine. I had a limp for a bit. My hand, my arm was, left-hand side was problematic moving, especially my hand of my left. I'm left-handed, so that was a real problem. I still got a bit, even now, of a drooped, sort of left-hand side of the face, especially if I'm tired. And my speech, you can probably tell, it's pretty good. But if I'm particularly tired, if I've had a really busy day, I can start slurring as well. I mean, it's like I had a busy day recently, and my dad thought that I'd gone back and started drinking again just because I was quite slurred on the phone. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And, no fault or blame for him. I can understand that because at the end of the day, I'm alcoholic, and he just forgot that because he's used to seeing me recently where I've not been too busy and my speech has been good. So I can understand. Still hurts a wee bit, but you know what I mean? It's just one of these things.
Yeah. So Kevin, I want to say something here too. And I know we spoke about this briefly before, but reading is like my big respite, right? When everything else is really fucked up and I'm having a really hard time, I know that I take solace in that I can read. So when I hear that you weren't even able to read, and you even said much earlier in our conversation today that even when you'd go to the pub, you would read, and this is just what you love to do. And so losing that just had to be just a triple blow to your mental health as well. And
I'm not seeing my daughter, and I'll be stressed about how things would go, given that the community service order had a certain amount of time to complete it, and it's worry about, I've got to go back to the sheriff. What's he going to decide on this? Because I'm not well enough to do it. That sort of way. And then just feeling useless about the house. I mean, since I've been moved out when I was 18, I've always done certainly my fair share of chores, or all the chores if I'm living on my own. So just feeling I couldn't even help with that. Couldn't even walk like 400 metres. And I'm a relatively fit guy. I played rugby from when I was 12 and I only retired at 40.
And why did you retire?
Well, I've had 10 concussions in total.
Did you say 10?
10, yeah. The last two I had when I was 40, and they occurred within six months of each other. One of your guests recently was a Green Brain. He was talking about from his experience of TBIs, basically with hearing voices, slurred or garbled speech. I've had all of that when I was 41, and I always thought it was just. At one point, I thought the house I was living in, which was like about 150 years old, was haunted or something, because it felt like someone did call my name. I was just looking around. I was in the house on my own and didn't know what the hell was going on. I mean, now it's been taken more seriously. I wouldn't mind have gotten that looked into, but unfortunately, the stroke's left me with brain damage. So I'm not going to get to the bottom of what's caused what. I know for a fact stroke was caused by a lot of pressure and a lot of just stress with my with my daughter's mum, my youngest daughter's mum, plus busy schedule, plus a lot of other things, and maybe something underlying from playing rugby. But that's what I am. So basically, my partner relapsed just before the stroke. She's an alcoholic as well. She'd relapsed, and even when there was obviously with her evenings and weekends, I was still maintaining my sobriety. But because I can't manage other people's sobriety, I can manage my own, but I can't influence what other people do. So obviously, stroke, feeling so low, basically led to me relapsing for about 3 months. And then last month, me and my partner decided that we need time apart, both try and get sober. Fair enough. So that led to me being homeless again, basically. Where I am now, same shelter as the first time around. And, I'm doing good. Been sober, about a month at this stage. Unfortunately, I just heard out from her today that she doesn't want to continue a relationship, which is obviously hard, but I've been through harder. And you know what? It's funny. I was just saying that to my dad earlier today. It's the first relationship as an adult I've had where we've agreed to part, and basically there haven't been kids involved. So, it's a nice change, yeah.
Well, I don't mean to laugh, but I'm so sorry to hear that. You just found that out today as we're recording?
Yeah, just before.
Oh, jeez. I'm so sorry, Kevin.
No, I mean, you know what? It's a shame. I'm disappointed because, we were engaged and we were talking about getting married. But do you know what? End of the day, my sobriety has got to come first. And as long as I'm with her and me not being able to manage her sobriety, because I can't, that's up to the individual. Basically, we're in a situation that if she had a relapse again, I may or I may not pick up alcohol again. But if she did, it'd make it that much more harder for me. So really, I've just got to I'm disappointed. She's put herself first there, and I understand that.
So, yeah, and you said you've got, a little under a month, and are you going to AA daily?
Yeah, I am at the moment, and just as well today, just at the meeting, my particular home group that I go to, they were looking for volunteers because they've actually had to close 3 of their meetings, just due to not having someone open the doors or volunteer to help out. I can't run a meeting yet because you need to be sober 90 days to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've said is, now that I've got a lot more free time, I'm certainly going to be along that helper at a couple that are shorter helpers. So, it's me doing my bit to pay back because I've had so much support from them and made some good friendships,
That's great. And so you at 90 days you'll be able to run a meeting. Is that what you're saying?
After
okay.
a bit of training, they'll give us a bit more than that probably just to because yourself, or you will have heard, I know in my mind I'm sober. That's where I am right now at this moment. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, this is the thing, it's a progressive illness, and the horrible thing about it is, you don't get to a stage that you do with other illnesses where it's so you win against it, you get victory, you have sort of mission accomplished banner on top of the thing. You don't have that. Every day is another day. That doesn't matter how many days you've been sober, you could pick up again. And if you do, 2 things to know. 1, it's a progressive illness. 2, I know from personal experience, this is why I hate the term rock bottom, because I know for a fact, because I've been there, you don't hit rock bottom. You never hit rock bottom.
What do you mean by that?
If you pick up again, no matter how bad you think things could be, at one stage I thought, oh, well, I'll split from a partner. That's my rock bottom, is that I'm drinking. I split from a partner. I'm drinking X. Next level is, that was me. I thought it was at rock bottom. Rock bottom now for me is being homeless.
Mm-hmm.
Drinking 25, picking up, getting back to where I was last time in terms of drinking amount that I thought was rock bottom, and something that I thought was something that was a rock bottom in terms of events. And next time I pick up, I've gone past it. It just changes all the time. So next for me would be, for example, being arrested and put in jail. That's the only place I'd say pretty much listen to alcoholic stories. I haven't been, or been homeless, been on the streets. So I can imagine that, because that's my next rock bottom. Haven't got there yet.
Well, good. And, as you said, it's today you're not drinking, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Exactly.
On top of the AA, what you told me you had something called Smart Recovery. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So it's basically based on cognitive behaviour therapy,
mm-hmm.
which certainly in the UK we use for loads. If anyone has any sort of trauma like PTSD, they'd be well used to it, or obsessive compulsive disorder,
yes, sir.
Or indeed addiction to alcohol or drugs or gambling or sex or any sort of addictive action. That can help because it's essentially trying to retrain your brain. So I do both at the moment. I mean, I like personally, my personal experience, my personal preference is A, just for me,
mm-hmm.
but everyone's different. And I just, it's tough, because we've got huge problems in Scotland with drugs, with alcohol. I mean, historically, we're kind of up there with the Irish. It's having a reputation for being heavy drinking, and same with Scandinavians. So it's difficult. There's basically, I'd widely say is the addiction services, certainly in the UK, and like I'm sure it'll be the same in your country, are very much, if you think mental health is the Cinderella service, compared with, say, cancer, with stuff like that, then basically addiction services are essentially treated as Cinderella's sister from the bad side of town, and less beautiful. She's the ugly sister from the worst schemer housing estate in the town. Because people just aren't interested.
Yeah.
Unless they're a celebrity.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin, often it is funny because it's true. I have to say this. You reached out to us the end of last month and sent a really heartfelt email, and we were able to get in touch last week. And the fact that you reached out, that you've shared your story with us today, with, I hate the phrase, but we'll say warts and all, right? You've talked about it is a huge, just not many people can do that. And I just myself am appreciative that you would share your story. I'm very excited to hear that right now you're focusing on your sobriety and no one else's. And I just can't tell you how much I think it's important of what you've done to reach out, how you've shared your story and all of its, ups and downs. And, I really appreciate it. And, I know that we are all 1,000% pulling for you. And, as we wrap up today, is there anything else that you would like to say to anyone out there, based on, kind of why you reached out in the first place, or anything that you want to impart that maybe we have not covered yet?
Sure. Thanks so much, Kevin. For me, it's a couple of things. It's just to say, if you, as a listener, feel any way touched by my story in terms of, this could apply to me, it might apply to me, do I maybe need to think about my drinking? Look, no one's going to tell you you're an alcoholic. And if you're honest with yourself, if you're drinking too much and want to do something about it. All I can say to you is I've been through a very hard path. And if I can help them to avoid having to go through what I've been through, brilliant. I mean, that's all I'd say, is that I wish I could have spoken to someone like me when I was starting drinking, just to say, you might think it's fun now, and yeah, it is. I'm an alcoholic because I love drinking. I love drinking too much that I put it before everything else. And it's really to say, if you're in that situation, if you're thinking about it, maybe you don't get it first time, maybe you don't get it second time. I certainly didn't. I've had more attempts to get sober than I have fingers in my hand, on both hands, plus those, and just keep plugging at it. That's all you can do,
Yeah.
And just as maybe think a bit more about people who are addicts for whatever problem they have. Because I tell you what, since I used to look my nose down at people in the street who knew were alcoholics or drug addicts,
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, when you get in a hostel with them, I am an addict. I'm a junkie as well. Same as everybody else. It's just my drug of choice is a bit more socially acceptable than someone who wants to shoot up or snort something or smoke something, And at the end of the day, they're human as well. I am.
I could not have said it better myself, Kevin. And one thing that it amazes me about you, the few conversations we've had, is how much hope you have. You said to me when we first spoke, you're like, there is hope. It's hard. I believe you said, and I'm going to quote you. So it's hard, but when did you ever do anything that is not hard?
Yeah. Or anything worthwhile.
Yes, exactly right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you for sharing your story and being on the show. I hope that you and I keep in touch. We wish you all of the best, and I know that you're going to be able to continue to take it one day at a time, which is all you can do.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kevin. Really appreciate it. But just thank you for the platform to share my experience, and thank you for inviting me on.
You got it, man. And to everybody else out there, I like to end with this, and I think Kevin is doing this now. There's always room for kindness and grace, especially with yourself. I'm moved by the way that Kevin is taking this one day at a time and allowing himself the grace. And I need to remember that for myself. And I think we can all remember that there's always room for kindness and grace. As we said, if you want to be on the show, you want to tell your story, please email us at sadtimeskc@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time on Sad Times.
You've been listening to a Fourth Hand Joint.